This is the Trading Psychology Podcast. This is VP, creator of No Nonsense Forex and author of the book No Nonsense Forex Trading Psychology. And with me, as he is every episode, he wakes up every morning and plants excellence. That's what he does. It's Robb Reinhold.
Well, thanks, Patrick. First thing I do is I plant my feet. Then I plant excellence.
And if you saw the title of this episode, you either know exactly what it is or you have no idea what it is. This is one of my episodes, so I'll go ahead and kind of kick things off here by defining terms. And the term planting bamboo is a really interesting one. So this one hits home with me a lot because when I first heard about it, I was still kind of on my way. I was on my journey. And things had been going for a few years, and they just weren't working out. But I kept at it, and that was a really hard thing to do, but I just didn't see any other choice. And I see this video pop up on YouTube with this Nigerian pastor talking about planting bamboo. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm bored. Let's see what this is about. And he told the story, and this is going to be hard to believe for a lot of people out there, Mr. Roboto here, Mr. Made of Wood. But I shed a tear, one isolated tear, when I listened to this. And the story goes like this if you don't know. There's different variations of it, but they all kind of go the same direction here. There's a man who lives in his house, and he goes out to the front yard and starts planting bamboo in his front yard. Now, bamboo, if you didn't know, does not grow at all for 5 years. But when it does grow, it grows a lot right away. And so he knew this, but most of the world doesn't know, unless you're in East Asia and you're familiar with bamboo. They don't know what bamboo does or the growing cycle of it. It's very unique this way. So he's out there and he's planting the seeds, and he's out there watering dry ground every day. And nothing's growing. And obviously his neighbors are coming by, and after a while they're like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm planting bamboo. Like, but nothing's growing. He's like, no, you just got to keep watering it. And so, then obviously the neighbors start to talk, and then his family hears about it, and then they start to talk, and they start having a little bit of an intervention, and because they honestly think this man's going crazy, going outside every day for 4 years, watering dry ground. And so the time finally comes when the bamboo starts to grow, and then it grows 20 stories high. And so the moral of the story is, of course, anytime you start any type of endeavor that has the potential of securing your future, this is kind of how the process is going to go. And it might not even be 5 years, it might be longer. But you just got to keep going outside and keep watering dry ground, despite what other people might say or think. And I was going through this too, Rob. I had family coming to me, I had friends coming to me, said, hey, why don't you're a restaurant guy. This is what you understand. This is what you're good at. Why don't you just go into management? And, I didn't want to say it out loud, but I was like, I don't want to work 70, 80 hours a week and give up on the thing that I'm building just to work a job that I know I would hate. Like that's always sounded like a death sentence to me. And so, as usual, everybody thought I was just crazy until the day came where I wasn't anymore. And so something like this really resonated with me, and I wanted to make a dedicated episode to it because, Rob, I just don't see any other path forward for most people. And in order to take this path, they have to, one, choose the path, and then two, really, really embrace it for a long time and eat a lot of shit along the way.
This reminds me of a saying, everyone's jealous of where you are, but nobody's jealous of how you got there. I love that saying. That, once you make it, people look back and say, oh, all that work was worth it. But when you're out there every day watering the ground, no sprouts are coming up, and not only are you wasting your time, but people are like, you're wasting your money because that water had a cost. You're wasting your time and money watering this thing that nothing's happening. Just with the faith that it's going to grow in 5 years, that's exactly what success is like. Now look, some people, they hit it big, they hit it quickly, and I love that. I love that story for them. But for the vast majority of people, that end up being financially successful in their life, it started exactly like this.
And most people don't choose this path for a couple reasons. One, I think people are just generally short sighted and they just kind of do what's good for them right now. And if they do put something away, they kind of do it with investments, they hand it off to somebody else, and they just kind of hope they'll have enough to retire. And usually, unless you were already rich to begin with, you don't retire with very comfortable money. I'm seeing this with my parents, my aunts, and that whole generation. They retired, but it's not like they can't do all the things they want to do. So, but this is just what normal people do. And I'm talking in the United States, where people are more entrepreneurial and they take more chances than people in a lot of other countries. And you still really don't see it in the U.S. And I understand why this is hard. Because, okay, you do something like this, one, not just really for the future, but to get out of a bad situation. A situation with work or your living arrangements, whatever you don't like. And who wants to work now for a situation they can get out of 5 years from now? That just doesn't sound very appealing to me. And I think this is the number one reason why people don't even start. Would you agree, or do you think there might be another reason?
I definitely agree with those psychological reasons, but this is also just a mathematical equation. The biggest thing that makes a difference is compounding interest, period. And that's why this Growing Bamboo episode is such a great one, because this is literally about exponential growth. How at first it seems minuscule. It seems like you can hardly see the growth. Let me just give you an example. Let's say someone at age 20. So let's say someone at age 20 decides, I'm going to put $1,000 a month away in savings. Now, look, I know at 20 that's probably hard, and I know that's not realistic, but I'm just using even numbers for the sake of math. So at the end of the first year, and let's say all they did was put it into a 5% dividend paying stock or a bond, or just something that pays 5%. So at the end of an entire year, they will have contributed $12,000 and they would have earned a whopping $600 in interest. So at the end of that, they'd have about $13,000. Just think about all you had to give up for that $1,000, and at the end of it, you've got $13,000. Well, at the end of 5 years, that person's going to have probably right around 80, 90, let's just say $100,000. Let's just round up $100,000. Okay, $100,000 earning 5% a year gives you $5,000 a year, or about $450 a month, or $400 a month. That's not great. Look, that's great. If someone just gave me $500 of income a month just from the savings I did, that's great, but that's not life-changing. That doesn't do anything. That's not even a car payment in the US anymore. But let's keep going. Let's go to year 10. Year 10, when it's somewhere around $200,000. Now it's $10,000 a year, or closer to $1,000 a month. Now we're starting to be able to pay for some stuff. This is after 10 years of sacrifice, of putting that $1,000 away, and that's all you've got. And then you go to 10 more years. It's now $400,000. This person is now 40 years old. They've been doing this for 20 years. That has grown to about $400,000. Now they get $20,000 of interest. Okay, now they're getting about $1,600, $1,700 a month. Okay, that covers half of a mortgage payment in the US. That starts to cover some things. And then we go forward to age 50. They now have $1 million. They now have $1 million, maybe a little bit more as we're adding in that $1,000. Now they're making $50,000 a year for doing nothing. You take that to 60. Now they're making $100,000 a year doing nothing. And now they can be like, oh, I want to retire. This is why it works this way, is that this is the longest game you can ever play. It's a long, long game. And at age 20 and 30, to have the perspective, I didn't have that perspective, to look forward to what it could grow to, until you live compound interest for yourself, you don't really get it. I thought I got it. I'm telling you what, I didn't. When you have millions of dollars and you're making 10% a year, if you have $3 million, you're making $300K a year. A 10% return is very doable just with basic investing things. You don't even have to trade. You just have to do basic investing. Compound interest is the real key to this.
Yeah, and I've touched on this numerous times on my other podcasts. There's people who listen to this podcast that actually don't know I have another one. It's an investing podcast. It's called the 10-Minute Contrarian. You can also get it on whatever platform you're listening to us right now. But what I say there is, we do talk about the rule of 72, which illustrates on more kind of black and white terms what you were just talking about, Rob. And I always tell people too, I was like, look, all the money I save as far as cash and all the money I spend, I get paid for it. I make sure all of my cash in the bank is earning interest somehow, whether it's on the blockchain, whether it's through a bond or a money market fund or a bond ETF, something that actually pays me for having the cash there. And then when I spend money, I always make sure I am part of some like loyalty program with wherever I'm at, which grocery store, whatever the case is. For some of you guys, it's gasoline. And I'm also using credit cards that give me points. Now, when you talk about this to somebody for the first time, they kind of do the math in front of them, and they're like, oh, well, this really doesn't seem like a whole lot. But they're missing the point, Rob. The point is what you talked about. If you keep doing it and just do it all the time, that little number you're looking at in front of you gets a lot bigger over time. And so this is really hard for people to understand. So that's another reason why I don't think a lot of people start. And I also think there's a couple more reasons that are really preventing anybody from doing anything like this. Before I get to those, do you have any you want to add or an extension to what I just said?
Yes, Patrick, we have never talked about this before, and you have opened up Pandora's box. I am the most annoying person. If you meet me in real life, within 10 minutes, I'm going to be talking about credit card points with you. I guarantee it. It's like that really annoying religious person where you have any conversation with them and you end up talking about God or Jesus eventually. I'm like that with credit card points. I love credit card points. I am completely devoted to playing the game. I travel the world and spend little to no money on flights and hotels. And I go on big trips. I go down to Australia, New Zealand. I go to Europe. I go wherever I want, most of the time business class, and I use points to pay for it. So when you total that whole thing up, and actually, Patrick, I put this into ChatGPT. I run everything through ChatGPT and it tracks all of my credit card points, and it tells me how much money I'm saving by using these points. I just took my family to New York. That New York trip would have cost $9,800. I ended up spending about $2,000. So I'm sorry. I told you opened up Pandora's box. I know this is not an episode on credit card points, so I will shut my mouth and let you take over.
It's not, but it needs to be said. I mean, the more we can glorify something like this, the better, because this is a perfect example about how people see what's right in front of them and they're not interested, but they have no idea how it can affect them in the future. But I will say that our example with interest and credit card points and the example of planting bamboo both have one thing in common, and that is they have definitive outcomes. A big reason why a lot of people don't even start is because there is no guarantee that anything's going to grow in 5 years. It could take longer than that. It might not grow at all. There is a real chance of that happening. A lot of it has to do with how much work you're actually putting into it, but this is a real problem for a lot of people because there is no guaranteed outcome. And the one thing I guess I would say to them is, well, there is no guaranteed outcome in life, but at least you're giving yourself a chance. You tell me, sir, madam, what's the alternative to that? That would be my biggest question.
And you're exactly right. The alternative is to not do this. Let me tell you a little story. I've never told this story really on any podcast before, and very few people know about it. But back in about 2003, 2004, so I've been trading for about 7 years, and I started to have a good amount of capital, and I started a development. So my buddy and I bought a property, and we started to develop. I think it was going to be like 18 lots on this property. It was in a historic district in my city, so we had to jump through lots of loopholes to, get city approval and all this stuff. And I knew that the market was going to turn. And we needed to get it done within the next 2 years. This was like 2005 in the US. It ended up taking us 3 years. When we finally got city approval, it was 2008. And do you remember what was happening in real estate in 2008 in the US?
It wasn't great.
Wasn't great. So we ended up holding on to the property, but I had sunk like $300,000 into development costs. And by the time we finally sold it a couple of years later, we sold it for less than we bought it for. That set me back quite a bit. That one event right there, when I take a look at my compounding interest, if you take a look back at like my equity curve of my net worth, that slowed me down quite a bit. Do I regret it? No, not at all. Why? Because I've done other stuff like that that's been a great success that did the exact opposite to my equity curve. The only alternative is I didn't take any risks. I didn't take any shots. And if you live a life like that, you can get a wage, you can save up, and hopefully you have enough, but you'll never have that life that you dream of.
Yeah, and honestly, there's two sides to this. The one is the aspirational side, but the other one, and I don't like using this angle. I would rather go pure aspirational, but there's a fear angle too here, Rob, because I just don't think people have much choice nowadays. What's going on in the world, and I explained this on a podcast episode 2. If you go since the year 2020, start there. So we're just talking this decade. The United States dollar, according to government inflation statistics, has lost just a little over 25% of its value. That's a quarter of people's earning power that's just not there anymore. And inflation doesn't really go the other way to where you get that back. It's just a matter of, do you lose more or do you lose less every year? Now, you and I can probably talk about this for a while, Rob, but we know from being traders, we have the CPI news, and the CPI doesn't factor in things like housing, gasoline, the things that most people the things that make up most people's expenses. So there's a company out there called Shadow Stats, to where this man attempts to figure out the real inflation out there, and he has his own numbers. And so I put it into AI and said, okay, tell me what this number would be, not by using made-up government statistics, but tell me what it would be using Shadow Stats, their statistics, in the last 5 years. The number jumps from over 25% to just over almost 65%. 65% of people's earnings, what they're able to buy with their money, gone in the last 5 years. Now, the real number is probably somewhere in between those two, but even that 25% was scary as shit. And it just, we have accelerated the path due to the amount of spending we do now compared to what we used to do, and how much we wasted, trying to solve a problem back in 2020, to where it's not going to get any better. And on top of that, if it wasn't scary enough, there's a good chance for many people out there that AI is going to take a chunk out of your workforce. Whether it's you, whether it's your friends, whether it's all of you, it's probably going to take a chunk out of some of you. It's coming. We know it's coming. And even people who think they're insulated probably aren't going to be. So again, I can understand just maybe not having the aspirational side and you really don't care and you're just kind of living for the now. Rob, I don't think now you have the choice to just sit there and go about your day like most people do all the time.
Totally agree. And I know this isn't an episode on inflation, and maybe we should do one on inflation. But, I've really jumped into these inflation studies and how they calculate inflation. And what you need to understand is what the way that, again, this is getting way off the topic, but I think it's so interesting. I want to talk about this so everyone understands how they calculate inflation. If you were to buy a computer today for $1,000, and then next year the government goes out and says, okay, how much does a computer cost? If a computer costs $1,000 next year, but it's 10% better than the computer was before, they mark that price went down 10%. So that's really the big reason, and it's, we could debate of whether or not we should do it that way, but that's the big reason why we have this artificially low inflation rate, because they're saying, oh, computers got 10% cheaper because you got 10% more computer for the same price it cost you last year. Technology and the advances in technology will only increase this difference between the real costs and what the government numbers are. Again, I know this is not about psychology whatsoever, but I think it's just such an interesting thing because you're exactly right. Inflation really doesn't matter as long as your income goes up more than it. Let's say that inflation was 10%. That sounds horrible. But let's say that your wages go up 20%. You are richer. You're richer. That inflation didn't hurt you. In fact, part of the reason your income went up was likely because of inflation going up. It actually helped you. But here's the problem. In America, especially if you're in the bottom 50% of earners, wages have absolutely not kept up with inflation. And every year you go to work, you go to your job, they give you your 3% yearly raise, and inflation goes up 5 or 6%. You're right, Patrick. This isn't about being aspirational. This is about survival. So the question is, how do you increase your income faster than inflation? And to do that, you've got to do something different than everyone else is doing.
Yeah, and I'll even argue too, if that number is closer to 60% or even somewhere in the middle, even the higher wage earners, only a very small amount of them actually had their wages keep up with inflation. I really do think this is affecting almost everybody. And, people will come back and say, well, okay, well, that just means that I need to put my money into things like gold or into things like Bitcoin or into things like assets. Because people say, oh, we're doing so well, look how great our stock market is. It's like, well, yeah, that's also a byproduct of a weakening currency. It's like, well, there's one stock market doing way better than ours, and that country's name is Venezuela. It'd be great if you had stocks there, but most people there don't. So this divide just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So yeah, okay, and you want to save in Bitcoin and gold and assets, that's fine. That's a good idea, but you need money to do that. And you're just, at the end of the day, the big solution is to make more money. Make more money somehow. Now, you can do that by working extra jobs. I've done it. It sucks. You don't have any time to build your dreams or anything like that. Trading becomes very hard, but that is an option. Or you can start planting some bamboo. Now, here's the thing. Most people listening to this podcast, they are already trading. So they think they are in good shape. I will say to you, dear trader, you need to do more. You need to plant more bamboo in other places. Have multiple streams of income in case one just doesn't work out, in case multiple don't work out, or in case over time you have all three going, but these things aren't necessarily consistent. You're going to have times where some of your income streams don't pay you much. But the other one will actually start footing the bill, and covering, and then vice versa. These things fluctuate. As somebody who has a lot of different income streams, trust me, they go up and down with the tides. But you need to build them first. And so you need to start now so you can build these income streams, make more money, and then you can decide how you protect the fiat currency you're actually making. But step A has to come before step B.
Getting ahead, Patrick, is just simply a mathematical equation, and it's simple. Now, simple and easy are not the same thing. It's simple. It is absolutely simple. What you just talked about, this inflation thing, the only people that beat inflation were asset holders. Anyone who is not an asset holder, they fell behind. If you owned assets, if you owned a house pre-COVID, you killed it. You killed it. Just by buying it, you killed it. Your house went up 50, 60, 70%. That's real money in your pocket. You need to be an asset holder if you want to beat inflation. Because I'll tell you what, inflation's not going away. It's going to be dragging at you your whole life. You must be an asset holder. So, if you don't have assets right now, it's a really simple mathematical equation. How much money do you have coming in? How much money do you have going out? If you don't have more money coming in than going out, you have no ability to buy assets and become an asset holder. It's a very simple equation. You must have money left at the end of your monthly budget that you can allocate towards investments, or else you will never get ahead. You will always be falling behind. So, in this episode, we're talking about bamboo. We're talking about both income. We can even talk about cutting expenses, and we can also talk about growing your assets. I hope everyone can see that in their brains so clearly. You have to have more money left at the end of each month than you spent. If you don't have that, you got to fix that first. Then you take the extra, you put it into assets, and you do that over and over and over again your whole life. And then you grow those assets, and one day you'll have bamboo coming out from everywhere.
Yeah, but the main focus I really personally want to preach this episode is the make more money part, because like we just said, that does have to come first. And you are going to continue to see, as this divide gets bigger and bigger and inflation gets worse and worse all over the world, these stories of how your everyday person just can't do anything anymore. And it's going to be very sad, but I guarantee you at the same time, my sympathy is not going to be as high as some others, because those people had the chance to take a chance and to try and plant some bamboo on their own, but they just didn't. They were either too afraid of the risk. I'll bet a lot of people were too afraid what their immediate family was going to think about them. And I get that. These are the people you have to cohabitate with every single day. You can't have them thinking you're crazy. You can't have them losing faith in you to provide. I get that. But there's going to be a host of reasons why they didn't even start. And then there will be another cadre of people who did start, but after one or two small setbacks, they completely quit. So my message to you, dear listener of this fine podcast, is to make sure you do not end up like either of these two people. You must start and you must keep going. And I will add the third that I said earlier. You must also make sure you have more than one iron in the fire. Because the best case scenario is the bamboo starts growing in all of them. Worst case scenario, none of them do, but at least you really upped your chances of something good happening by having more of those irons in the fire. And so this is going to take a lot from you. I was just planting one thing of bamboo. My other businesses didn't come around until a little bit later. But I can only imagine, starting 3 different projects that aren't going to pay off for a while also working a job, while also providing for yourself and family members. This is not going to be easy. This is hard, but like all good things in life, it's supposed to be difficult. That's the only thing I can really say about this is, at the end of the day, I just don't think you have a choice but to put your head down and do this multiple times in different ways. The good news, one of the things I can say at least right now is, Rob, tell me if you agree, but with AI, I think the opportunities have actually gotten better here, not worse, just in terms of, 1, finding these opportunities, 2, using AI to leverage these opportunities once you get them. I am using AI in every single thing I am doing right now, and it has been to my benefit so far.
I just had more time, Patrick. I would own 10 more businesses that were all run by AI. And I keep telling my daughter, you need to run this business for me. Here's the idea. You need to do the work. I don't have the time to do the work. You need to do the work. It's just not who she is. She's listened to a few of them. But I did want to tell one story that I used to tell my kids. One night, my daughter and I were talking about something that she was trying to do. And she was telling me all the steps that she had to do and all the work she had to put into it. And she's like, Dad, it's so hard. And I said, oh my gosh, that's amazing, because that means it's going to be awesome. And I remember her looking at me and thinking about that. And I said, I'm so glad it's hard, because when you do all that, do you know how rewarding that's going to be? Do you know how amazing that's going to be? And she was looking at it like, oh my gosh, it's so hard. It's going to be so much work. It's going to take so much time. And I really wanted to reframe that into, can you imagine how amazing that's going to be? And I told her, when things are hard, you know they're worthwhile. That's how you know something's worthwhile. Is it hard? And if you find yourself in a situation where you're like, oh my gosh, this is hard, remember this lesson. It's going to be amazing once you get through all the hard work. So I think absolutely everything you're saying, Patrick, spot on. And when you said earlier in this episode, you said you think people have to do this. It's not even a choice. At first, when you said that, I'm like, maybe, maybe not. I'm with you now, 100%. You have to get in front of the inflation curve. You have to make more money than it costs to live, and you've got to invest it in things that go up in value. You have to do this. There's no choice.
But here's the good news. Once the bamboo starts to grow, you don't have to worry about just surviving. Things can actually get really good. For example, like I said, I'm not this multimillionaire success story, but I am financially free, and I can say that all the money I earn right now is because of things I did 5 years ago. And this motivates me every day to work hard right now for the future version of VP 5 years from now. That is tremendously exciting to me. It wasn't before, because 5 years was a long time ahead. But now that I see how it works, and now that I'm getting paid for my previous work now, all I want to do now, Rob, is just keep doing more things and keep learning new methods and techniques and ways of investing and taking on new jobs, just so I can pay myself even more and better 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. Now that I see how this works, guys, once you get it, you get it. And that engine just never, ever stops. I can only speak for myself here, Rob. How do you feel about it?
You're exactly right. And first, at the beginning, everything is sweat labor, or sweat equity, let's call it. If you've never heard of this term before, sweat equity is like, let's say you buy a really dumpy house. Let's say you buy a really dumpy house that needs lots of work, and you buy it for $200,000, and you put a year of your life into it. You spend $30,000, $40,000, and you fix it up, and by the end of the year, the value is $300,000. You created that equity through sweat, through your hard work. You're going over there night after night after night and patching holes in the wall and repainting and doing all the stuff. That's called sweat equity. Everything in the beginning is sweat equity. It's 100% sweat equity. As you start to grow that nest egg, your nest egg starts to take some of the pressure off. And all of a sudden you start to see things that aren't sweat equity. It's actually just compounding interest growth. And then once you get, as I said, a large account, trading a $1 million account is so much easier than trading a $10,000 account. Why? Because you're free. You're like, I'm going to put a little bit here, a little bit here. And it's just easier. And when you only make 15% a year, that's $150,000. When you're at $10,000 and you work your butt off, you work and work and work, and at the end of the year, you've made $1,500 for all that effort. That's really hard to look at that sweat equity and say that was worth it. But remember, once you grow your assets, the same amount of effort is going to create larger results. That's what I love about this bamboo analogy, is that it just keeps compounding and compounding and compounding. And it just came from a little seed and 5 years of sweat equity.
Now, speaking of, it's not quite bamboo, but I guess it's in the same family, Rob. You were telling me about your new middle-aged man hobby, which I found to be tremendously interesting and actually very relevant to this episode. Do you want to tell everybody now, or should I just edit this question out?
No, we'll talk about it real quick. It is bonsai. And you're right, it is a very cliche thing for a 51-year-old man who has a little bit of free time and money on his hands to get into. I got into it earlier this year, and when I really started to learn about it, I realized it takes probably about 10 to 20 years to start a tree from scratch and finally get it into its final pot. And there are trees out there that people have been working on for 40 years. Can you imagine? And that's why bonsai is just so mind-blowing, is that, can you imagine planting something 40 years ago, watering it every day, making sure it's getting the right sun? Every now and then it's losing some leaves and you got to go do some emergency stuff to try to get it to survive. And then 40 years later, you finally do your final clipping, your final potting, your final wiring, and it's now a showpiece. It's amazing. And so I'm starting this process, and now I got a bunch of trees here in my office and outside, and I'm excited for those days. I can't wait for 40 years to finally reshape these trees, but I finally understand what it takes. In my 20s, I could have never done this in my 20s. I just couldn't have done it. I didn't have the patience. Now, I'm looking at all these trees being like, you know what? I'm so excited. If I water this thing every single day and I take care of it and I fertilize it like it should, I can't wait for in 15 years for me to bear the fruits of my labor. It's awesome. Take this analogy, put it into your life, and just build and grow.
And so for the majority of us who don't have Rob Reinhold money or time, I guess the solution would be me repeating what I was saying earlier, is that whatever motivates you here, whether it's aspiration or fear, let them both motivate you, because it's both true. The light at the end of the tunnel here is really awesome and is worth any time or shame or setbacks or heartache you put into it. But also, there is going to be a real and very ugly dichotomy, I'm afraid, in 5-10 years, maybe sooner, of the haves and have-nots. And most of the haves are going to have some type of bamboo they planted somewhere. You can't just invest your way out of this. You got to have the money to invest in the first place. So do whatever it takes to get some of these things started now. Multiple things apart from just trading. It's great that you already got this far with trading, but this is also a great thing because you are obviously the type of person who's not afraid to plant a little bit of bamboo. So go out and plant more. And hopefully in a few years, or maybe even sooner, these things will really start to proliferate, because it doesn't always have to be just 5 years. There is a chance it could happen sooner. Don't expect it, but it certainly could. But again, none of this stuff even matters if you don't get started with something as soon as possible. So Rob, do you want to leave them with anything?
No, I've left them with everything I can think of.
Yeah, we left it all out in the field this episode, traders. But thank you for joining us here at the Trading Psychology Podcast. And on that note, Rob and I will both see you in the next episode.
Bye, everybody. Go plant those seeds.